Hello, my name is Dan Qualiana, the head of developer relations at Zebra Technologies, and I wanted to welcome you to today's DevTalk. Today we have Adebayo Onigbanjo from Zebra's Software Business Unit. He's going to be talking us through some of Zebra's strategy around the Internet of Things and what our response to all the changes in the industry are. But before we dive into Adebayo's presentation, just wanted to give everyone a reminder that if you're looking to find more dev talks or more information on software development with Zebra Technologies, you can go to developer.zebra.com. And if you're looking for more webinars like this, there's a developer events section. And we already have a few more events scheduled. So in October 4th, just a few weeks, we have Zebra's UI UX team is going to present on user experience for enterprise applications. That's a great session that we led at some of our app forums that really gives a lot of insight into the rugged enterprise class environments Zebra plays in, some of the things that we have learned from our customers on how they're looking for things to be laid out and presented in applications to be as effective as possible. And then on October 18th, we have Darren Campbell, one of the architects on Zebra's Android team, is going to talk about how to best lock down your Android device to make sure that the users are only getting access to the appropriate content on that device. So again, that's at developer.zebra.com. We also have all the old dev talks we've done posted up there, and we have a channel on Zebra's YouTube space. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Adebayo. And I guess one last reminder, if you do have any questions for this presentation, there's a question window in the GoToWebinar frame, and you can just type that question in and we'll make sure we raise those up. So I'm going to turn everything over to Adebayo now.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes.
Okay, good. Good morning, all. Thank you very much for joining us today. Dan, thanks for the introduction. And so, as Dan indicated, this is something that we've been talking about for a while. Some of you potentially might have been at our app forums this year. We did talk about this topic. And some of you might have seen communication that has gone out in the last couple of weeks inviting partners and developers to be part of this ecosystem as we build out new intelligent applications. So what I want to do today is just kind of walk you through, thinking behind that, why we're doing it, some of the opportunities we see around here. And then I'll also provide an update on what we're calling our Partner Accelerator program, so you guys can understand how to participate and be a part of this. Okay. So with that, I have 20 slides. I think should be fine. The session is recorded, and as Dan indicated, if you have questions, please put them in the chat session, and I'll be happy to answer them at the end. So we'll be looking at data as the new reality. I think this is already a common phrase. I think everybody agrees that data is where the value is. We'll look at a data system framework that Zebra is building, and we're getting set to announce. So be expecting some announcement around the 26th of September around this new data framework. I'll talk about the partner play. And I'll also give you some examples of the new types of solutions that we're thinking about that I think would be really exciting for you guys as you find a way to play with what we're doing. And then I'll provide an update, like I indicated, on the Partner Accelerator program. Okay, so this is something I tend to tell people when people ask the question. So why is a company like Zebra excited about data? You guys do really great products, you do devices, you're at the edge of the network, what are you going to do with data? And I always point people back into the consumer space. I think, the consumer space is something that really reflects what's going to happen in the enterprise. It's easier to adopt in the consumer space because it's selling to you and I individually. We pick it up, I like it, I tell my friend, it goes viral, and then all of a sudden it's, a big traction. Versus in an enterprise environment, it's truly hard to change, and sometimes it's slower. So I tend to look into the consumer space to get an indication of what's coming into the enterprise. And if you take away something, that's something you guys should always think about as you build applications for the enterprise. They might not naturally feel like they fit into the enterprise when you see them in the consumer space, but when you spend some time and think about it, you would find synergies. So hopefully a lot of you recognize the image in the background. That's a Pokemon Go display app running on that device. And one of the things that I want to talk about is if we take a step back, 5 years ago, there was all the craze around Candy Crush, and really it was just, an application running on a device. And, it didn't rely on anything from the device itself. The device just acted as a host. Okay, and today we have a lot of Zebra devices in the marketplace, in the enterprise, doing exactly that function. You have an app. The app just gets installed on the Zebra device, and so the Zebra device is just really the host acting. But what we saw last year was with Pokemon Go, we saw an application that wasn't just relying on the device as a host, but was also using data coming from that device to actually augment how that application was running and the experience you got on the application. And so on the screen, you actually see 4 different sensors that are coming from the device. So we have the GPS. And the GPS was important to come from the device because you needed to understand the direction at which the Pokemon player was actually going. And so you could determine what you're looking for. The accelerometer was also important to determine the pace, right? Because if I was working too fast, I might not be able to see something, so the application would actually show me a Pokemon I could capture. The camera was also important to visualize when and where you were, right? So you could get a context. And then location was used to determine habitat. These are examples of data that were coming strictly from the device. Now, if you think about this in the context of an enterprise, how does that all of a sudden become important? Right, so we take retail, for example. Today we have applications running in the retail environment. Sometimes you have that sales associate at the front of the store, maybe just doing price labeling. Sometimes he's at the back of the store, actually doing inventory count and fulfillment. The other times he's actually, just called out to support, an online order. Right, and all this context need to start being represented in the actual application and how that application functions. And this is the premise of where we're going, right? So when you think about it again in the enterprise space, this is some of the things that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, right? So real-time events, there are tens of millions of real-time events that are happening every second in an enterprise environment, right? People are moving things, items are going off the shelf, items are being purchased, items are being returned. All these events actually count for something, and Zebra is at the edge of this because we can capture exactly what's going on. There's the sensing. We're sensing millions of changes in those enterprise environments. As imaging is something that's going to be big. Zebra's already adopting it. For those of you that are aware of our Smart Lens solution, which is for retail, it actually has a video camera in it. Right, so we can capture images, and this is bound to increase. Our handheld devices have scanners and cameras on them that can actually capture front and back images. Now, location is another thing that's growing, and then of course there's the workflow, right? So there are billions of tasks that need to happen by different people within the store, right? So this context is really getting us to think about, okay, if we can capture all those data points, how can we make this data point available to developers, to our partners, so it's easier for them to actually build out applications? So we talk a lot in Zebra around the concept of system of reality, and primarily the difference between the system of reality and what was legacy or considered the system of record is that in a system of record, you capture something, you collect the data, you store it, and then you use it at a later point in time. So very typical to a batch system, ERP, legacy ERP systems. But we are moving into a world now where real-time events, what's actually happening now, is critical to the operation of that business. And so that's kind of what we call a system of reality, where it's using a combination of real-time events, sensors, analytics, and potentially a combination of cloud, either private, public, or hybrid, or even on-prem servers, to actually capture the data, understand what's happening with that data, and then be able to provide some level of information to people to actually perform a task. And so when you look at that, the system of reality really enables a digital transformation, data-driven solutions, and workflow transformation. And workflow transformation is something that we're really, really excited about, because a lot of the people we deal with, the folks that use our devices, they're having to make instant decisions, right? Your FedEx driver that's loading his truck, he has to make sure that he can load that truck as fast as possible, because there is a Amazon 1 hour delivery timeline associated with a package, right? You know, the caregiver within the hospital environment has to make sure that that patient doesn't spend too long in the ER or in the waiting room, because, you know, there's a particular time associated with that procedure, right? Those are decisions they have to make. And the more information they have, the more intelligent they have, we can help transform those workflows. So people can get empowered to say, you know what, I'm going to skip this step now because I can make this decision and I can then fulfill this on time, right? We need to remember that processes shouldn't run us. They're just there to enable us. And workflow transformation is really kind of the way we look at that. So when we look at this system framework, what does it look like? You know, like I indicated, you know, Zebra's devices that a lot of you know today exist at the edge of the network, right? So think of this really as the lowest layer within that architecture, right? So a lot of this data devices are capturing information, they're scanning information, they're enabling actions. We're building a framework that allows us to collect all that data from those devices in a very simple, seamless, and secured way, right? Now that comes through at the edge of the network, right? So the way we're going to do it is we're going to build in agents into all our devices going forward. That allows us to securely collect data from them. That information then goes into a cloud type architecture, right? It could be on-prem, depending on the customer and the use case, where all that data is then stored, is accessed, it's analyzed, it's shared with other use cases. For example, so if you look in this architecture, and I'll show you an example later, but the data coming from the hardware goes into kind of like the device on-prem connectivity. There's data sharing, access, and storage. But to the right of that, you can actually interact with the system of record. And what that means is we're not replacing BI tools or ERP systems. Those systems are still going to be relevant. They're still going to exist in the environment. What we're doing is we're using the data that we're collecting and capturing at the edge of the network to enhance and augment the data those guys have. And I'll show you an example like I indicated. Then there's also the analytics portion, right? So really analytics varies, right? So there's the big data analytics, which is, you know, we collect a bunch of data, we learn from it, and then we can start predicting stuff from it. There's what we also call near real-time analytics. Like, what does it mean if I scan 10 devices or 10, you know, pairs of genes at the same time? Can I gain data from that? Do I understand anything from that? And then at the top of that layer again, think of it as the reverse, right? Where you now have applications that will be running on devices, right? So that some of those applications will be built by Zebra, so we can just, you know, help validate and grow this ecosystem. But the bulk of it is really going to be built by our partner ecosystem, because you guys are closer to the customers, you understand what those challenges are, and that's where your expertise lie, while ours lies in enabling those architecture, enabling the devices that actually provide that information. So when we think about it, there are three key components of this, right? So there's the device connectivity, configuration, and monitoring, right? That's how do you connect that device? How do you get the data from that device? How do you manage that device and make sure that the device is actually not rogue? It's reporting what it should be reporting. The next one is really the data capture, near real-time analytics, big data, and machine learning, right? Because we're collecting all that data, we're storing it, we have to apply some level of intelligence to it, right? So there's that opportunity. And on the top of it is really the applications, which include the application API and tools that developers or partners can actually use to access the information and the services that we can get from this data device framework, okay? So when we look at it from a system block perspective, what you see is, again, remember the devices at the edge of the network. They have what we'll call a Zebra agent in them. And then at the top of it, to the not bound, you actually have potentially 3 API points, right? So the first one is what we kind of think of as a current device status. That's very basic, right? You can get the device status, the properties, commands, settings, basically all the basic data points from that device, right? That offers a framework. And what that means is we have partners today that are already saying, listen, I've invested in some level of analytics and framework. I don't need Zebra to do this for me because I've already built this out. But what I do need, I still need the data points, right? So those guys can use that. They can use current device status where they then augment what they have. We also have partners that are doing, and saying, listen, okay, I would like to get some near real-time events from you, but I have the opportunity to actually inject data into that because my application is also capturing some other form of data, right? So we can also inject data into it and then provide near real-time events. Near real-time events might be as simple as, the battery on that device is about to die. What does that mean? Right, that we could send that data back up. The application then says, okay, well, if the battery is about to die, and this person is still in the middle of this task that I know is still going to take him 20 minutes, I want to shut down, a number of applications that don't require a battery at this point in time. Those are kind of near real-time events, right? So, or it could be weather. Can we take the weather injection and say, okay, well, it's going to rain, so what should we be doing in a transport and logistics scenario? Right, those are near real-time events that we can inject data in. And then finally, you get the batch analytics, right? So that's data that's been stored, data that's been consumed and learned from, that allows us to provide some level of intelligent insight, right? And some of those insights will be provided by us, some will be with partners as well. So when we look at that architecture, there are 2 ways they can be hosted, right? So here you look at the cloud component. All of this architecture can sit in the cloud, right? So those APIs are all accessed through the cloud. It makes it super easy and faster to develop and actually build something. Or you can have an on-prem type architecture. And what you will notice here is that the on-prem actually doesn't extend into batch. And a lot of you will understand why, right? So from a batch processing perspective, this requires a lot of infrastructure. It just doesn't make sense to have that volume of server and rack space within your premises just to store big data analytics, right? So what you will get is you can easily get the device connectivity status, near real times, and some sliver of analytics, but it would never be anything like the volume we can store in the cloud, right? So that's just something to think about as you work on those type of use cases. Now, okay, so what's the benefit of this data system, right? So we've spoken a lot about faster time to market. This is really key, right? I spent a lot of time with partners and developers this year, and a lot of them tell us about the challenges of, trying to get data from a Zebra device, right? So obviously the handheld devices that run on Android are easier, but once you start going into printers, for example, or even RFID readers or scanners, that can be, really time consuming. And if you think about it from a developer and partner perspective, your focus is on applications. You don't want to spend your time trying to figure out how do I collect data from a Zebra device or what does that data interpret as, right? So this data framework really allows you to go through that pretty quickly. The framework is also built on a standard cloud architecture perspective, right? So it uses embed technology where it allows us to securely connect from chip to cloud. Right, and what that means is that the devices that we're connecting to you have embedded software in them. That improves the security. So it's not an additional software agent just sitting on that device. It's actually embedded. So that provides an integrated cloud connect type architecture. So it also lowers the risk, right? So due to multiple platforms, right? If we provide that level of scale, you don't have to worry about it on your end. You can learn from other people, you can share data from other people, and you could even make your data available as potentially something else. And then, of course, there's the integrated analytics that we'll provide that you can augment or you can actually use in white label as you please. So the question of why now, right? Well, the key thing for us is based on our history and what we're seeing out there, we know that location is going to be key, right? Everything we build, everything we see today involves location. Location has become critical. And Zebra is a big location company. For those of you that know, we've been in the space trying to figure out location. I mean, when you trace back even as basic as a barcoding label or RFID, those are really to enable us find stuff, right? So location is only going to increase. And the context of taking location to augment application is really where the future is going. And then, of course, there's machine learning and AI, right? So we heard a lot about AI, but the concept of AI is training stuff, right? And the more data we can collect, right? So today, I'll talk to you about the example where we have, but today we're collecting a significant amount of data, and having an AI that can understand that data and help us not just on the inside to understand how do we build better devices and architecture, but also enable applications that our partners or end user customers are building. So I spoke about examples, right? One of the things it's important for us is we've looked at this framework as an architecture perspective, we've built it, but we've also started using it, right? So this is not something that we're just offering out to the external community. We're using this because it's important for us, right? So this example I'm actually showing is an application we built in-house. It's called Spotfire. It's basically an engineering tool. It allows our engineering team to manage our handheld devices so they understand exactly how that device is performing. Today, under management, we have close to 900,000 devices. We can get the status ID, OS, network, time zone, memory, location data, battery, the applications that are running on it, the user that's logged in. This allows us to understand how devices start performing, right? We also know that this data provides us some new information around, okay, why does a device crash, right? And which applications lead to that? The battery information, and do we have a batch of batteries that are actually bad, right? And think of this as an internal use using that exact framework. The other thing that's also really cool about this architecture is that if you look to the left of this table, so you can see the handheld computer data, this exact same data set can be used to build an entirely different application using the exact same data set. And it goes back to my faster time to market. So we can have 40 partners that are asking for the exact same data, and all those 40 partners will build entirely different applications using the exact same set of data. Okay, that's the beauty of it. And so that gives you skill, that gives you flexibility to actually build out things pretty quickly and very robustly. So that exact same framework, we think about it here for services that we have, which is around asset visibility service and operational visibility service. So we use this to actually support our customers on a service perspective. So for example, if you remember that architecture where I said to the right, you can connect into system of records, I'll show you an example of how we're doing that. But the idea behind here is we're using that same exact set of data, we're collecting it, but we're now interfacing that data with our service record data. So I can understand if a battery is going bad, I can immediately see how many times has that device been brought in for service. Is it a case of that battery is just not good and needs to be replaced? Or what else is happening with that particular device, right? So again, same set of data, different application and different use cases, right? This is another example of something that's today being deployed in a healthcare environment using that same architecture and running on the framework. This actually combines two types of devices. So we have a sensor device. It's actually based on a Bluetooth sensor that allows us to get location. We can configure a patient ID. So for those of you in healthcare, you understand why we're avoiding using patient names. You get an ID, associate that patient with the ID, and at the back end of the system, again, you can connect to that system of record in the hospital environment, which will typically be an ERP, electronic health record, to determine exactly where that patient is. But the sensor just cares about the location, the patient ID, the battery on the sensor, so we can make sure that that battery doesn't run dead and we don't lose visibility of that patient, the proximity of that patient to designated and defined locations. And then you have a Zebra handheld mobile computing device that's acting as a gateway. So that is interacting with the Bluetooth sensor via Bluetooth, collecting all that data, and then acting as a gateway to aggregate all the data that it can collect and sending that into the data framework. Okay, and so in this particular example, this use case is used to actually monitor patients that come in for a particular procedure. It's called cardiovascular. It's a STEMI procedure. So patients that actually have a heart attack, and they have a predefined window where the hospital tries to get treatment to them because there's enough data that points to if they don't get that treatment within a particular amount of time, they start losing muscle, which then makes it harder for them to recover from that heart attack. And so in that particular example, you can see that dashboard. What the dashboard shows the caregivers is the patient ID. In this instance, it's blue 165. It can tell you exactly the number of minutes that patient has been in the hospital, the time the patient has left based on the recommendation of the hospital's practice to actually get a needle time or a balloon time, which are critical in STEMI patients. So again, in this particular example, this healthcare provider knows nothing about the data framework, knows nothing about how the data is moving from those sensors on the wristband of the patient. All they care about is knowing that, okay, I've issued that patient a wristband and I have this dashboard I need to monitor. But at the back end of it, there's so much data being collected, there's so much data being filtered, there's so much data being stored, there's so much data being analyzed, so you can get a view like this. And that's what the future looks like for enterprise applications. Right? There's going to be that core engine that has to do all the work, but typically most users are going to experience either one device at the edge that they can interact with and a dashboard or application that's giving them the data and the insight that they're getting. Okay. So next step for partners when we started announcing this was we wanted to invite partners to come on board and test run this framework, right? So like I indicated, we built some applications already using this exact framework. We wanted to enable partners to also come on board and so they could talk about it. Here we provided an example of some of the data sets that we can collect today. And then we invited partners to participate in an accelerator program, right? And this is some of the benefits I think I touched on to them. But from a partner perspective, we're going to provide data and access into the framework. We're going to provide services. We're going to work with them to co-develop applications. We're going to also provide partners opportunity for marketing and some co-funding dollars. So for example, this process is closed for phase 1. 5 partners have been selected. The 5 partners are going to be announced on the 26th of September. And so if you think about it from a partner perspective, it's a global announcement. It gives our partner initiative. The program itself kicks off in October. And so the partners will have dedicated resources working with Zebra to build out the application. They will also have access to our vertical teams so they can discuss some of the use cases that they're building. As I indicated, it was open for 4 weeks. We had 69 applications. Here are some of the names of partners that have been accepted. We have 40 plus use cases looking to collect data from the Zebra devices at the edge of the network. And so the idea is this 5 partners will be the phase 1. They will start testing. The rest of the partners that are actually not in phase 1 are all going to be invited to be part of a developer forum community. So this is going to be on zebra.developer.com, where they will be able to be part of the conversation, so they will know exactly what's happening with the development. We expect that in the early start of the new year, they will then start getting access into the framework as well, so they can be part of the process, right? So nobody's losing in this instance. It's just that we, from a framework and capacity perspective, we had the framework this year to be able to start with 5. As we move into next year, we'll have additional resources. A bulk of the framework and documentation will be there, and then we'll open it up even to the rest of the partners that submitted into this application. Then the commercial launch is bound to happen around the second half of next year. Okay, so that is what I had today. So Dan, I will pass back to you, and if we have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Bio. Really appreciate that. It's a great overview. And I mean, I'm really excited. And I know, as we went around to our app forums and have been talking to ISVs, I know that there's a huge amount of excitement for this new platform. We have such a large install base of products out there and so much data just kind of waiting to be harnessed and analyzed to help our enterprise customers improve their operations. So right now, as Bio said, if you guys have any questions, please go ahead, submit them in the question box. Right now, I'm not seeing any. So I think that means, Adebayo, you did a fantastic job of introducing everything. But we can give people another minute or so. I'm trying to think, if there's some other things that we really can highlight here, but I think one thing that that really has struck me with this, I've been doing a lot of research around IoT, and I think for the last couple of years, the statistics were that 80% of IoT solutions were failing when they went to market, and the research behind that was that almost all of them were really failing because they were technology driven rather than being built around customer problems and use case driven. And I've seen a huge shift as we've worked with developers, and particularly in those who submitted their ideas to participate, that there are real customer issues out there that people are solving by gathering this data, doing the analysis, and helping these businesses take smarter actions. So it's neat to see a real shift in the whole spectrum of this the landscape here. Well, Bio, it doesn't look like we have any questions, so I think we're going to be able to wrap things up. And I just wanted to say a really big thank you. This was a great overview of what Zebra's doing, and really excited to see the applications that come out of this and help everyone else get easier access to this data.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.